Good morning, everyone. I'm Councilor Driscoll, the chair for the Department of Public Works. I'm joined by President Hudson, Councilor Hogan, who just stepped away for a minute, Councilor Schultz, Councilor Allen, and joining us is Commissioner Awald to address items, I believe, 64 and 65. So if you'd like to let us know what's going on and give us an update, that'd be great.
Sure. Good morning. Item 64, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the 5% rate increase. Is that what 64 is?
Yes.
So that is to increase our water rates 5%. The minimum quarterly bill would go from $40.15 to $42 and to $42.16. So per minimum quarter usage, it would raise by $2.01.
What's the minimum usage, Joe?
The minimum quantity that a water allotment per quarter it's in cubic feet, but cubic feet's kind of hard to visualize, but it's like 9,900 gallons per
And
quarter.
what's the cost, like, just say I went away for a year but my water was still on. What's the minimal cost for my
So
water bill?
if you use no water or little water during the quarter, you'd get charged that minimum charge. So, per quarter, $42, 4 quarters in a year, you're looking at,
160 a year.
160, almost 190 a year.
Yeah, 170.
So the minimum, I'll get charged to $42.
Correct.
If I don't use any water.
Correct. Now, if you go away for an extended period of time, like the winter, you can have it shut off. So no,
Oh, you don't shut water off in the winter?
Oh, if
So-
you bleed the pipe.
so you can shut it off and winterize it. Some people do that. That way you don't have water sitting in your pipes, so it doesn't freeze. So you can shut it off at the meter, and you probably drain your house of your domestic water line. So that way you don't have water sitting in your copper pipes.
Okay.
Could potentially freeze because nothing's moving, nothing's.
But do you still, if you shut it off, you still try to pay that $42?
I believe so. I think it's just to protect you so nothing breaks and leaks and you get a $40,000 bill when you get back from the winter, which has happened.
So question, how often do you increase these rates and why are you doing it now?
So rates historically haven't been increased incrementally over years. Historically, they've been increased when there's been either large capital projects that need to be done or there was a consent order that needed to happen, like back in 2008.
Yeah, a while ago.
Or I think it's 2005 or 6, the city was mandated to provide UV treatment and cover their water reservoirs. That's when we got the Westcott Reservoir tanks and 2 new UV facilities at both reservoirs. That was a mandate by the state, so rates had to increase to help pay for those capital projects, which I think they totaled around $40 million at that point in time. Typically, as a utility, we would like to raise rates in small increments like every year, like 1%, 2%. Historically, that hasn't happened. We've raised them when we've needed to. The last raise we had was for fiscal year 20. We raised it 4%. And then the 2 years after that, we didn't raise rates. We changed our rate structure. So we had what we call a declining block structure. So the more you use, the cheaper the water got. And that was for industry that used large amounts of water to help promote growth. Well, a lot of that industry is now gone from the area, so we don't have those large users contributing to the system. So we reduced our thresholds on those blocks and actually chopped off the last tier, last year, I think it was, or the year before that. To help, instead of doing a rate increase, we kind of shrunk everyone into a smaller pool to help increase revenue.
Wondering if you had anything to say.
I would also just say that he basically either raises the rate or doesn't in the budget process, and then the legislation to change the rates comes after, so that's what he's doing now. But in practice, we raise it as the budget comes through. And then there have been times where they haven't raised it for a long time and it requires a correction of a large increase. So the goal is now to be more steady about the increase. And Joe, we talk about the price of like water pipes and stuff in terms of the inflation. So 5% may seem higher, but his costs have gone up far more.
So you said we raised the rate, 4% in 2020. Didn't we have a rate increase under Miners administration as well?
There was, I think the last year in Miners administration, there was a rate increase of like 1%, something like that. 1.5%. But other than that, it's historically been at this utility to raise it when there's capital projects or big expenses coming up. Thank you.
So are we looking to be standard 5% from now on when the rate increase happens?
No, I think this year was a odd year because of the inflation. So I just got handed, here's kind of a chart of the rate increases. Except for the tail.
I love the tail, they're blue.
You can
Water
pass
blue.
those around. So this is a chart historically showing the rate increases and what they've been since, I forget what's on that, since 90-something, 1990-something. So as you can see, it hasn't been steady or consistent in any fashion.
At 25%.
That was a big one.
Yeah, was that due to it?
I think that was
Capital
due
project?
to the oncoming capital projects of the reservoirs and the UV stuff.
How are we with the reservoirs now? We're good
Good meaning,
as far as all the UV stuff?
yes, all that's in place and running and in good shape. We're gonna do some maintenance on the reservoirs, probably this summer with some of the valving inside, but overall, everything's been pretty good. So part of the other, reason for this rate increase at 5% is that the cost of our materials are going up, and that also contributes to item 65 as well, which is the infrastructure investment fee. So here I have a chart showing the cost of pipe based on their size over the last, since 2020. So the cost of materials have gone up dramatically. And actually, the pipe cost on that was before we got the notification that the pipe vendors have told us, we will charge you the cost of the pipe when it shows up to your job, not at the time of order. So if I order pipe in January and it shows up in December, whatever the price in December is what I'm gonna get charged.
Wow.
So it's hard to plan capital projects when you don't know if it's gonna be a 5% increase, 20% increase on your costs or not. Similarly, with the valves, the costs have gone up as well. So item 65 is infrastructure fee, which tackles some of these material costs, because again, that fee is only for material purposes only, not labor or equipment or anything like that. Strictly pipe, valves, and the stuff we put in the ground and utilize every day.
Is the new chlorination system part of this, the Skinny Atlas?
That is a capital project, something we've planned on and put in our capital budget.
Okay.
So that would also contribute to, increasing the rates a little bit to help pay for those capital projects that we're seeing have to be done.
Okay. Do you have
What's
any
the rate
updates?
of running the water department? I mean, what's the increase as far as the cost of running the water department every year? We have a percentage on
It's-
that?
It depends, because our budget, a quarter or 20% of our budget is debt service.
Right,
And then I think
which
there's
is
about
significant.
significant, correct. And that entails some of those large capital projects they've done in the past. A lot of the capital projects we've been doing recently, we've been very fortunate in obtaining grant funding to fund these projects. So I forget the exact total, but I think it was over the last 4 years, we've done $17 million in capital projects, and we've been able to secure, I think it was 10 or 12 million in grant funding for these projects. So we've really cut our capital projects costs down because of these grants, so we've been able to hold those rates kind of steady. I think another 20% is approximately what we spend on breaks and leaks every year, between the maintenance, or not the maintenance, the repairs of those breaks and then the restoration repairs. Restoration repairs are getting very costly with the asphalt and the stone and the curbing and all that type of stuff. That is very costly as part of our operating costs. And the rest is, everything else in the budget.
So you have an aggressive plan to address some of those significant infrastructure issues.
Right.
And you're doing
So-
that, and I admire you for doing that too, Commissioner, because frankly, that sort of didn't happen in the previous administration, but you seem to have like really aggressively done that.
Yeah, we're tackling everything we can and trying keeping it in a modest approach. I mean, if I could do everything in one swoop, I would, but we can't. We got to plan it and coordinate it and not burden everyone at one point in time. So we've been trying to tackle some of the key components of the infrastructure, such as stuff out at Skinny Atlas Lake. If we don't have that working properly, we can't bring it into the city.
Right.
So we've tackled 90% of everything out there other than the coordination, which is, it's working properly, but we want to upgrade it so it's less liability for us and a little safer and cheaper and to operate. So that's why we're thinking of potentially going towards on-site generation, which we kind of discussed a little bit. So we're in the works of doing that study component as part of that project.
So you got a situation where you're paying debt service, 25% of your budget goes to that. And then the other 75%, you have to address all these significant problems that piled up over the years. And if you look at the amount of money we're asking from the public to support the water system, it goes in peaks and valleys, and there's no like incremental, maybe
Right.
an incremental fee should be on a yearly basis or something
Kinda,
small.
correct. So that's kind of why we've introduced the infrastructure fee 2 years ago, was it now? But that was part of our, to get more of a stable revenue base. Because right now, our 96% of our revenue is based on consumption. It can go up and can go down. So it's hard to manage that. Where if you have that kind of base fee, at least you have some stability in your revenue. Now, when we started out at 25 cents, that wasn't a whole heck of a lot, but it was something we could dedicate strictly for materials.
And obviously, consumption's gone down
Right.
because, as you mentioned, heavy industry being out of the city,
Right.
all sorts of new gadgets that prevent.
For save water, we're seeing more industry come back into the city, but again, they're not using the vast amounts of water that they used to back in the 60s and 70s and stuff like that. But they are starting to increase some consumption. So that's good. So the more industry and stuff we get back in the city, it'll better to help use more water, which then helps us address a lot of these underlying conditions.
And nobody gets a free ride with the water rates.
Correct.
All the tax exempt entities pay.
Right.
water rates.
Also with the infrastructure fee, that doesn't apply to tax exempt, so those tax exempt properties, the bigger the meter, the bigger the fee they have.
Churches included?
Oh,
I think so,
everybody, nobody's exempt.
yeah.
They pay a lower amount.
What? They using the same water.
No, it's holy water, come on.
See?
I have a person who comes up to me, knocks on my door, and complains about the minimum usage fee, and lets me know he doesn't use any kind of water at all, which makes me want to put him far away from me usually, but, so, I have to explain to him we have a minimum usage
Right.
fee, because we're all in this together.
Right, and that minimum usage kind of is, part of that stability factor of revenue, but again, it's not enough to completely offset everything that we need to do, but at least gives us some stability for stuff that's here. But again, it's all based on consumption. If everyone used the minimum, we'd be hurting. So. Any other questions?
When you said it was, you talked about the reservoirs in New York State and it was mandated. When they mandate that, they put money behind it?
When they did the upgrades, I think back then there was grants put into it, and then there was low interest loans, like 0% or subsidized.
that we took advantage of.
Okay.
Yep.
And so with the, just so I understand correctly, the infrastructure improvement fee, all that money is set to a separate account that just goes towards supplies for infrastructure, refurbishing the system, yes?
So, yeah, strictly goes for materials that we use for the water system. So pipes and valves, services, corporations, valve boxes, any hard materials. It's not labor or overhead or anything like that.
And you said it's estimated 50 cents. What, but it varies? What affects the
So it
variance?
varies based on your meter size. So again, and it's all based on how much capacity can get flowed through the meter. And, that's based on AWWA standards. So it's a percentage of that. So the bigger meters get a bigger fee because they have bigger infrastructure that goes through it.
Okay, and then the 5%, that's just rate increase, yeah?
5% across the board.
But even with the tax exempt, they still are gonna get the 5%. Or
Right.
is
They
it,
still use water, goes through the meter, we charge them.
So Commissioner, help me, so when you order, cause you know what your valves and things are, do you stock up on those?
Yes.
Make sure the price doesn't continue to rise on us?
So that's what we did. I think we ordered, because we knew we had some capital projects coming up. And at that point in time, one of the pipe contracts was gonna expire within the next week. We didn't have the design yet, but we kinda had a basis of what we were gonna do. So we ordered, I think, 15,000 linear feet of pipe at the cheaper cost. I think that was in October of last year, or maybe September. But again, that hasn't even shown up. So I'm glad we ordered it ahead of time to take advantage of that lower cost, especially now with the prices being whatever they are gonna be when they show up.
Then I have one more, just quick question. Have we removed all of the wood pipes out of the ground?
There are no wood pipes in service. We don't typically go in and just pull them out.
I know they may not be in service, but they're still there.
Some are still there, yeah. So once in a while, we'll dig stuff up and we'll find an old one. But it's very rare at this point in time.
Didn't you say that the pipe cost per linear foot didn't get determined until delivery day?
Correct.
So you said you ordered that and you were glad you did it at the lower cost.
Yes.
So do we know that lower cost is still gonna be?
So we did it back in October when we had a contract that was still valid. I think in March, the vendor said, we can't hold those prices, so we're gonna charge you whatever it is at the time of delivery.
Right,
So,
okay.
so we ordered that pipe in October. It's on its way. That's still at that contract cost and not at the, I don't know, rate. Does that make sense?
Okay. Sure. October rate is set.
Yep. So anything we purchased with a valid contract, those prices are set. Once they said we can't hold that price and kind of broke the contract, all bets are off. So anything from here going out, we don't know what it's gonna be.
And so
You don't know when it's gonna show up.
And so you said you've, the goal here, right, so we see the crazy chart with, as Counselor Allen was humorously remarking to me, they must have had a hard time in 2010 when they jacked it by 25% and hearing from constituents. But we said, you guys are gonna try to do it more frequently, more incrementally. So have we thought, how often, is this gonna be every year you're thinking 2 or 3%, or every other year doing 5, or have we thought about what we think would be reasonable going forward?
There's several approaches we can do. And it's all dependent on what we want to accomplish in those upcoming years. You could look at what you're planning for capital projects and look at what your expenses are in the previous years and kind of budget accordingly for the next year and say, all right, is this going to be a 2%, 3%? Or if we can hold costs to where they are, we can start, going 1% every year or 2% every year. But that's something we'll look at as we see how this economy unfolds and how we're going to have to approach it. But my hope would be that we could do something small incrementally, because the small increments, it's not going to hit your pocketbook too hard.
Right.
Like that 25%, I bet you that was a big eyebrow raiser at the time.
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
I mean, that's unheard of.
Yeah, it's a
But
big
if
leap.
you can do a 1%, 1.5% every year, and you see that small increment, at some points in time, you can start.
But even 1% is probably too low because we're locking in essentially 3% wage increases for most labor. So if that's 65, 70% of his budget, then he needs
Right.
2.5 no matter what to cover his increase if the water sold is the same amount. So
Yeah,
Don't go low
Right.
to start.
Yeah,
It's
I
far
don't know.
away. He probably needs 3% every year, and then more when there's really high inflation.
That's kind of where I was going with this, Director Rudd, too, because I'm also curious, like, if I understand correctly, our rates are lower than compared to other municipalities, is that correct?
We are on the lower end of the spectrum. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, because I haven't updated all those rates in a few years, but, you know, in 2020, we're, I think, third lowest in the region,
Yeah,
so,
Does that go by population size though?
yeah, we looked at like Buffalo, Rochester, Elmira,
Or do they have a
Albany.
big tax base?
That I didn't look at, we just looked at
Right,
rates
because you
and
have to look at
population.
what our tax base is too.
Right.
yeah. Yeah, I would definitely just, from my personal, I mean, I know we have, as you said, you have to take small bites, right? Because to redo the whole system would be, what, ballpark $1 billion, something like that, or?
Yeah, it's large.
It would be a large leap,
Large-
right? to
large leap, yep.
Overhaul the whole system, so, yeah, just to follow up what Director Rudd said, I would definitely encourage, every few years, a rate hike like this, 5%, something like that, to, want to make sure that's, I think it's, we definitely have, a great water system here, great supply, great source, and, especially looking at what's happening out west, frequently this is becoming more and more an important resource, something we're relying on, something that makes areas more valuable for economic development, as we're starting to see. So I would definitely be in favor of, just speaking personally, not for the whole council, but seeing a healthy increase every few years like this to make sure that we're updating our infrastructure and taking care of it.
Can I ask you, do you ever foresee, you know how the federal government now is doing all of like the bridges and they're pushing money out around the country? Do you ever think that they would do a water infrastructure across the country ever?
They have different infrastructure packages come out every year, and we take advantage of those. That's where a lot of the grant money comes from. The federal money gets pushed down to the state, and then we,
I'm
apply
talking
for those grants.
like the 1 billion so we can fix everything.
I would love to be able to get that, something like that. As they just put out that,
Biden's got the no-lead pipes thing
yeah,
going on right
forget the
now.
name of that bill.
Infrastructure bill?
Yeah, but there's another name to
Grants
it.
for water, is that what it is?
So, but that involves lead services. So we just got notification from the state health or state funding departments that those applications are out. So we're putting together a plan on how we can tackle some of these lead services in the city and how much we should plan for over the next 3 to 4 years and how much we should ask for. So that application's due at the end of August. So there is money out there, and we're gonna get it wherever we can get it.
Any additional questions from my fellow councilors? Councilor Hogan, Schultz, no, Allen? All right. Well, thank you, Commissioner. Thank you both for coming in today, and good luck out there. Godspeed.
All right, thank you.
All right, thanks, everyone.
Yeah, your district, but not for your district.
And then 1.6 billion from infrastructure investment. That was Hochul's big thing 2 months ago, I think.